Imagine this scenario, if you would. You finally decide, you know what? I am completely fed up with the corporate rat race.
Oh, a very common feeling.
Right. So you sell most of your belongings, you buy one of those beautifully converted Sprinter vans, and you just hit the road.
Living the dream.
Exactly, living the dream. You curate this perfectly sun-drenched rustic aesthetic. You park by a gorgeous secluded beach in Baja. You step out to do your morning yoga, and you look down the coastline to realize, wait,
Let me guess.
yeah, there are 45 other identical vans with 45 other people wearing the exact same linen pants, doing the exact same sun salutations.
It's just so true.
You haven't actually escaped the pressure to fit an image, you know? You just swapped the gray cubicle uniform for the Bohemian Wanderer uniform. You traded one highly curated aesthetic for another.
It is a brilliant illusion, really. We spend so much energy trying to escape conformity, only to find ourselves, well, conforming to a different, slightly more niche set of rules.
Yeah, exactly.
And that subtle, often exhausting pressure to curate an identity is exactly what we are dissecting today.
Which is the core mission for our deep dive today. We're exploring a fascinating transformational pathway laid out in a framework known as the 8th gene key.
Right, the gene keys.
Yeah, and for those who might not be familiar with that term, the gene keys is essentially a modern philosophical synthesis. It combines elements of the ancient I Ching, astrology, and psychology into a map of human consciousness.
It's broken down into 64 distinct archetypes, or keys.
Exactly. And the 8th key specifically deals with this exact journey, moving from a deeply conditioned state of mediocrity and imitation all the way to a peak state of pure, unfiltered exquisiteness.
It's quite a leap.
It is. It's a framework that will fundamentally challenge how you, the listener, construct your own personal image.
Okay, let's unpack this. Where does this mechanism of imitation actually start? I mean, how do we end up so obsessed with our own image in the first place?
Yeah.
Well, the baseline state in this framework is called the shadow of imitation. And to understand the mechanics of it, we have to look at the primary emotional driver beneath it.
Which is what?
Fear. Specifically, the deep-seated survival-based fear of what other people think.
Ah, right.
Yeah, it's not just a superficial worry about, wearing the wrong shoes. It's an evolutionary terror of being exiled from the tribe.
Because back in the day, being exiled meant you wouldn't survive.
Exactly. When you operate from this shadow state, your entire consciousness becomes a tangled web of perception management.
Perception management, wow.
Yeah, you are managing the image you project, the image you hold of yourself internally, and even the image you assume other people have of your image.
Which takes an immense amount of cognitive load. I mean, it's a constant background processing task.
Oh, absolutely exhausting.
If you're terrified of judgment, the most logical defense mechanism is to just look around, analyze the environment, and, well, mimic whatever is considered acceptable and safe.
Precisely. And this framework has a highly descriptive term for the psychological landscape this creates. They call it genetic suburbia.
Oh, that is a wildly evocative phrase, genetic suburbia.
Right.
It immediately conjures up rows and rows of identical manicured lawns, predictable routines, and just an overarching desperation to keep up appearances.
It perfectly captures the energy. The people dwelling in this internal genetic suburbia operate on what is called maintenance consciousness.
Maintenance consciousness, meaning they just maintain things.
Exactly. They are the ones who maintain the status quo. They keep the institutions running.
Right.
They follow the established protocols. They ensure the structural integrity of society remains intact.
But they don't really innovate.
Right. The critical distinction is that they do not add anything genuinely original to the world. They exist in a predictable, highly managed space because the priority is safety, not expression.
They're essentially the background processes of society. It's almost like being an NPC, a non-player character in a video game.
That is a great way to put it.
You know, you wake up, you recite your predetermined dialogue, you walk your programmed path, and you absolutely never break the game's code.
You stay right on the script.
But I want to dig into how this programming gets installed, because this isn't something we are born with, right?
No, not at all. It is entirely conditioned. The framework points out that this maintenance consciousness is constructed over our first 21 years of life.
Oh, wow, 21 years.
Yeah, broken down into 3 7-year cycles. But those first 7 years are the absolute bedrock.
Okay, so toddler age up to early elementary school.
Exactly. Think about the psychology of a toddler or a young child. They possess this natural, uninhibited ecstasy and light.
They just do whatever they want.
Right. But very quickly, they learn the transactional nature of their environment. They learned that conforming, smiling when told, staying quiet, acting a certain way, equals safety, food, and affection.
Ah, I see.
And nonconformity equals punishment or withdrawal of love. So very early on, we literally trade our natural, unfiltered consciousness for the illusion of security.
Which brings me right back to the van life scenario I brought up at the start, because I have to push back on the mechanics here just a bit.
Go for it.
If genetic suburbia is defined as doing what everyone else does to feel safe within the mainstream, what happens when I actively and aggressively reject the mainstream?
Okay, setting up the rebel.
Yeah, say I quit my corporate job, I refuse to engage in modern consumerism, I move to that beach and dedicate my life to obscure avant-garde art. By the logic of this framework, haven't I successfully broken out of maintenance consciousness?
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
Haven't I beaten the shadow of imitation?
That is the trap that catches almost everyone. It is the logical assumption that the opposite of conformity is freedom. But this framework dismantles that completely.
Really? How so?
Because if your alternative lifestyle is fundamentally a reaction against the mainstream, if your primary motivation is simply, I do not want to be mediocre like them, you are still entirely trapped in the shadow of imitation.
Let's break down the psychology of that. If I am doing the exact opposite of the corporate worker, how am I imitating?
Because your identity is still entirely tethered to the corporate worker. You're defining yourself entirely by the negative space around the mainstream.
Oh, wow. Hadn't thought about it like that.
Right. If society says go right, and your immediate instinct is, well, must go left to prove I am different, society is still dictating your direction. You aren't acting freely, you are reacting.
That makes a lot of sense.
The framework warns that many people confuse the path less traveled with true liberation. You can drop out of the rat race, you can become an outcast, a seeker, or a radical.
But you're still playing the game.
Exactly. If the underlying engine driving your choices is a reaction to mediocrity, it is just a new kind of imitation. You've just built a new kind of suburbia with its own rules, its own uniforms, and its own intense self-consciousness.
So the psychological mechanism hasn't changed at all. The currency is still image.
Exactly. The currency is still image.
In the corporate world, the currency is looking professional and successful. In the alternative world, the currency is looking detached, rebellious, or spiritually advanced.
You nailed it.
I mean, I want people to look at my avant-garde art or my off-grid setup and say, wow, they're so exotic, they're a true rebel. But the sheer fact that I desire that specific recognition proves I'm still obsessed with my image.
Yes. The desire to be seen as a rebel reveals that you still deeply care about external validation. You want to be known as the person who doesn't care what others think.
Which is a massive paradox.
A massive paradox.
Huh.
True genius, according to this model, cannot exist in that state of subtle self-consciousness.
It just blocks it completely.
Right. If you are creating art or dancing or writing music, and there is even a fractional part of your brain calculating how different or exotic this will appear to an audience, the art loses its true ecstatic power.
It's contaminated by the ego, basically.
Exactly. There's a vast chasm between being exotic, which is just a calculated performance of difference, and possessing genuine genius, which is entirely uncalculated.
That distinction is vital. Exotic is a manufactured image. Genius is an authentic expression that exists regardless of an audience.
Right.
So if conforming to the rules is a trap, and actively rebelling against the rules is also a trap.
Both dead ends.
This raises an important question. What does an actual true rebel look like if both of the obvious paths are dead ends?
The true rebel, in this context, lacks even a trace of imitation because they are no longer reacting to the external world at all.
They just don't care.
Right. They aren't trying to uphold an image, and they certainly aren't trying to destroy one. They exist entirely outside the binary of conformity and rebellion.
Wow, outside the binary entirely.
And that marks the transition into the next stage of this framework, moving out of the shadow of imitation and into what is called the gift of style.
Okay, let's get into the mechanics of the gift of style because we need to throw away our conventional definition of that word immediately, right?
Oh, absolutely.
We are not talking about haute couture or interior design or having a great vintage wardrobe. In this framework, style has absolutely nothing to do with aesthetics or the material plane.
Nothing at all.
It defines style purely as the quality and frequency of your consciousness.
Right. It is the frequency of genius in action. The transition from imitation to style is described as an internal atomic explosion.
An atomic explosion?
Yeah, because it happens when all the fixed, rigid definitions you have built around your identity begin to melt away. True style is deeply rebellious, but it is an internal creative rebellion, not a reactive one.
That's a huge difference.
It operates in a state of constant recreation, exploring new paradigms without any fear of the mundane world, and crucially, without any need to define itself against that mundane world.
So it is the ultimate psychological flexibility. The mechanism of true style is that it constantly short-circuits your own self-image. To operate here, you have to drop every single label you cling to. You can no longer walk around anchoring your identity to statements like, I am a fierce warrior, or I am a deeply kind person.
Or even, I am the misunderstood bad boy.
Right. Or, I am an enlightened spiritual seeker. Every single one of those definitions, even the noble positive ones, has to be thrown into an alchemical cauldron and dissolved.
The psychology behind that is profound. Why do labels trap us? Because the second you adopt a fixed label, you have created a structure.
And structures require maintenance.
Exactly. What do structures require? Maintenance. The moment you decide you are the enlightened spiritual seeker, you suddenly have an image to protect.
Oh man, that sounds exhausting again.
It is. You have to start monitoring your behavior to ensure it aligns with that label, which pulls your consciousness right back down into the fear-driven maintenance state. You are back in genetic suburbia.
You're back to managing perceptions. And this is where the framework introduces a really crucial pairing. In the gene keys system, archetypes often operate in pairs that balance and influence each other.
Right, the programming partners.
Yeah, so the 8th gift of style is paired with its programming partner, the 14th gift of competence. And understanding how these two interact explains the true mechanism of freedom here.
The partnership between style and competence is a brilliant mechanical explanation. Competence, in this context, isn't about having a good resume.
It's not about your LinkedIn profile.
No, definitely not. It is the supreme ability to adapt flawlessly to whatever the present moment requires. But you can only achieve that level of flawless adaptation if you have zero investment in a fixed self-image.
The thought experiment the framework uses here is fantastic. It says that someone operating with true style and competence has the internal flexibility to be a plumber one moment and a pirate the next.
I love that example.
Because there is no rigid ego blocking the way, they can just do what is needed. If a pipe bursts, the spiritual guru with a rigid self-image might say, well, I am too majestic to deal with sewage. That is off-brand for my aura.
Right, I don't do pipes.
Exactly. But the person with true style simply picks up a wrench and fixes the pipe. They aren't bogged down by a voice in their head auditing their actions against a personal brand.
It is the purest form of surrender. It is life expressing itself directly through the individual without the bottleneck of an ego trying to direct traffic.
It sounds incredibly freeing.
It is. But the framework openly acknowledges that this level of surrender sounds a bit like madness to the conditioned mind.
Oh, I bet.
It requires asking yourself a very confronting question. Are you willing to be seen as completely, utterly ordinary if that is what the moment requires of you?
That's a test.
Yeah. Could you give up your carefully constructed alternative identity and blend right back into the mundane world without feeling like you lost yourself?
Here's where it gets really interesting. That precise question leads to one of the most counterintuitive concepts in this entire philosophy. It's called the paradox of the marketplace.
The paradox of the marketplace is a beautiful illustration of how true internal freedom manifests externally. The framework points out that true style bridges paradoxes internally.
How does it do that?
Instead of projecting dualities out into the world like the rebel versus the conformist or the spiritual versus the mundane, the individual unites them within.
Ah, so they don't need to act it out.
Exactly. Because their inner rebellion is so profound and their inner light is so secure, they do not need their outer life to reflect it.
Wow.
Therefore, someone operating at the peak of the gift of style might actually lead an incredibly ordinary, seemingly mundane external life.
Which completely shatters our cultural expectations of what a genius or a rebel is supposed to look like. We expect them to be flamboyant, disruptive, constantly challenging the status quo with their clothes and their actions.
But that's just an image.
Right. The ultimate rebel might literally be the person in sweatpants standing behind you in line at the grocery store, buying milk and feeling absolutely unbothered.
It's just completely at peace.
They don't need the facial tattoos, the megaphone, or the custom van to signal their freedom to the world because their internal state is already completely liberated. They have lost the fear of appearing mediocre.
They are entirely immune to the shadow of imitation because the concept of appearing mediocre no longer holds any psychological weight.
That's fascinating.
The text emphasizes that true style is completely happy to merge with the masses. It delights in the simple, mundane marketplace of human existence.
But they still have a distinct presence, right?
Oh, certainly. However, the framework is clear, that even though they might look ordinary on paper, their presence is unmistakable. True style radiates energetically.
Like you can just feel it when you're around them.
Yes. Through their posture, the timbre of their voice, their total lack of defensive armor, and their profound open-heartedness. They rest comfortably in the deep uncertainty of life, totally unfettered by cultural expectations.
So we have traced this path from the fear-driven, highly curated genetic suburbia up through the label-shattering, adaptable freedom of the gift of style. But there is one final, ultimate stage in this framework.
The absolute peak state of consciousness.
Yes, the culmination of this journey is known as the 8th CD of exquisiteness.
And we should probably define siddhi here.
Good point.
In Eastern philosophy, and within this system, a siddhi refers to a divine gift or an ultimate state of spiritual realization. It is the highest frequency of a particular archetype.
It's kind of hard to put into words, isn't it?
It is. And the framework itself acknowledges the sheer difficulty of using language to describe a state that is fundamentally beyond the mind. They caution against getting bogged down in the terminology, urging us instead to look at the energetic mechanics of this state.
To explain those mechanics, the framework uses two deeply powerful, seemingly contradictory metaphors. The first is a diamond.
The diamond, yes.
When trying to conceptualize this 8th CD, the imagery of a diamond is used because it represents supreme integration. A diamond is incredibly multifaceted, refracting light in countless directions.
Much like a human being who has integrated all their conflicting emotions.
Exactly. Emotions, skills, and experiences. Yet, despite those facets, a diamond is indivisibly one. It possesses an absolute, uncompromising geometric perfection.
That underlying geometry is a critical mechanism here. A diamond is structurally an octahedron, an 8-sided shape.
Which ties perfectly to the 8th gene key.
This is no coincidence within the framework, no.
Yeah.
It mirrors the 8th gene key itself, and it traces back to the 8th hexagram in the ancient I Ching, which translates to holding together.
Holding together, I like that.
The significance of this 8-sided geometry is that it is a foundational structure found throughout all of life. We see it in the architecture of DNA helices and in the theoretical universal lattice that physicists suggest holds space-time together.
It's literally everywhere.
It is. The diamond represents supreme structural integrity. It is the ultimate symbol of individual perfection, forged under immense pressure into something entirely unique.
But there is a mechanical problem with a diamond, right? It is the hardest substance on Earth, yes, but it is also entirely rigid. It cannot adapt.
It's brittle.
And the framework recognizes that if you only rely on the diamond metaphor, you miss half the equation of this peak state.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, a diamond, for all its strength, is brittle. If you strike it at the exact right angle, it shatters.
It just falls apart.
Right. If an individual merely stands alone in their unique perfection, isolated like a jewel without a deep functional connection to the whole of existence, they remain brittle.
So what's the solution?
Therefore, the framework pairs the rigid perfection of the diamond with a genetic grouping it calls the codon ring of water.
Let's unpack codon rings briefly for context. In this system, specific archetypes are clustered together into rings that are said to influence biological and energetic functions. This specific one, the ring of water, introduces the vital mechanics of flow, temporariness, and extreme adaptability.
It provides the behavioral counterbalance to the diamond's structural rigidity. And the key characteristic of water highlighted here is its weakness.
Weakness. But not in a bad way.
No, this is a deeply mystical weakness. A diamond resists pressure, but water yields to it completely.
If you strike water, it just flows around the impact.
Exactly. It has no fixed substance, no rigid shape to defend. Chemically and energetically, it is magnetically weak, meaning it doesn't hold on to anything.
So it's totally fluid.
Because it yields perfectly, it creates no friction, it tracks no karma, it holds no rigid agenda, and it invites zero opposition. It just rests in a state of absolute flow.
So the true mechanism of the city of exquisiteness is the impossible synthesis of these two extremes.
The diamond and the water.
Right. To reach this ultimate peak, you must possess the supreme multifaceted structural integrity of the diamond. You must be an entirely unique, realized individual. But simultaneously, your behavioral interface with the world must be completely egoless, yielding, and without any fixed defense mechanisms, exactly like water.
Which is quite the paradox.
By doing absolutely nothing to uphold a personal image, the framework states you become an anti-rebel. You completely transcend the agonizing game of individuality.
You step right out of the arena.
And the ultimate paradox is that by entirely dissolving your desperate need for a self-image, you finally discover your true nature, because you become indistinguishable from the flow of life itself.
It is a total shift in the locus of consciousness. You step out of the noisy, image-obsessed mind and into the wordless reality of existence.
From the mind to the flow.
The framework describes this as anchoring the permanence of your consciousness within the absolute impermanence of physical form.
Which is a beautiful way to phrase it.
And that specific mechanism, recognizing the relentless flowing change of water, transitions us perfectly into the final and arguably most liberating mechanism of this entire philosophy.
The profound reality of impermanence. This is where the framework zooms out to a deeply cosmic perspective to finalize the destruction of the shadow of imitation.
To drive this point home, the framework utilizes a passage from the Diamond Sutra, one of the most revered texts in Eastern philosophy.
Oh, I love the Diamond Sutra. What does it say?
It asks us to look at the mechanics of reality through this lens. It says, "Thus shall you think of this fleeting world, a star at dawn, a bubble in a stream, a flash of lightning in a summer cloud, a flickering lamp, a phantom, and a dream."
When you really process the mechanics of that quote, it acts as a solvent for the ego.
It really does. It dissolves everything.
The framework asks you to look directly at your own highly curated life through that exact lens. The aesthetic you are trying to perfect, the career title you are desperate to attain, the specific subculture you want to impress.
It is all vanishing in real time.
The framework points out a brutal but beautiful truth. In the grand cosmic timeline, a single stray asteroid could hit, and our entire planet, with all its history, is instantly gone.
Just wiped out.
Millions of years of human evolution, our desperate striving, our anxiety over social media followers, our dramatic attempts to be either the perfect conformist or the perfect radical rebel. In the end, every single bit of it will be erased, leaving absolutely no trace.
So what does this all mean? The ultimate takeaway is that truly internalizing this cosmic impermanence is the absolute cure for the fear of what others think.
Because it doesn't matter anyway.
Exactly. When you realize that the stage you are performing on, the audience watching you, the character you are playing, are all just a puff of dust in the cosmic wind, the heavy, agonizing pressure of imitation just evaporates.
You no longer have to exhaust your psychological energy curating an identity that the universe is inevitably going to wash away. The cognitive load drops to zero.
Your consciousness can finally just rest.
You can exist in the world, engaging with it fully, but without the desperate attachment, floating like that diamond on the ever-changing waters. You realize that the intense pressure to be someone important or unique was just a temporary game all along.
It strips away the suffocating seriousness we attach to our social identities.
It really does.
It gives you the ultimate permission slip to experience the raw sensation of living without constantly running that draining background software that monitors how you are being perceived by the crowd.
Which leaves us with a lingering thought for you, the listener, to carry into the rest of your day. We have mapped out the entire trap. The conditioned fear of suburbia, the deceptive allure of the fake rebel, the profound adaptability of having no fixed style, and the ultimate liberating surrender to cosmic impermanence.
A huge journey.
So I want you to consider this scenario. If every single external label you currently use to navigate society, your job title, your carefully curated aesthetic, your political affiliations, your spiritual beliefs, even your most prideful, rebellious streaks, if every single one of those structures was completely erased from your mind tomorrow morning,
Just gone.
what is the underlying you that remains? If you didn't have to maintain an image for anyone, including yourself, who would you actually be?